Villains. The characters that you love to hate. A good villain is necessary to any good story, as the villain represents how strong the hero must be in order to defeat them. The quality of the villain in turn reflects onto the quality of the hero and determines how good the overall story truly is. The animated villains I'm going to talk about in this video are some of the most savage to ever exist. When I think of villains that strike a chord of fear in my heart, but also make me excited to watch how they torment the protagonist, these are some of the first that come to mind. The first villain on this list is none other than Death from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. When I first saw this movie, I was blown away by everything. The storytelling, the animation, but most of all, the villain. Never have I ever been more captivated, shook, and intrigued by an animated villain than I was with Death. Firstly, the introduction of his character was amazing. We as the audience didn't know how to feel about him or what his purpose was. He just showed up and instantly brought a bone-chilling vibe with him. This was supposed to be a kids movie, but I actually ended up being scared of Death myself. The way he talked, his character design, his weapons, and his iconic whistle. Everything about him just screamed imminent threat. So it's no wonder when he reveals himself to be Death, and not just a bounty hunter wanting to end Puss for a reward, but the physical embodiment of death. Some may argue that Death is natural. He comes for us all, and he's just doing his job. So can he really be classified as a villain? Well, in the beginning, he is definitely a villain to Puss, as Puss does not want to accept the reality that Death is eventually going to catch up to him. And in turn, Death becomes angry that Puss wasted 8 of his 9 lives, when most people only get 1. He wanted Puss to learn the value of a life, and he did his job by tormenting him, stalking him, haunting him, and causing him to eventually have a panic attack. All this was Death's way of letting him know it's time to wake up and learn a valuable lesson about life and what makes it so special. By the end of the movie, after his fight with Death, Puss learns to accept Death and value his one life, causing Death's tone to shift, going from being desperate to end the life of this egotistical feline to being reluctantly accepting of his newfound humbleness. Once he knows Puss has changed, he makes his exit, but not before letting him know that they will meet again, reminding not only Puss, but the audience as well, that Death isn't one to be taken lightly. If you're ever feeling too arrogant, he will come for you and let you know that you are not immortal. Now, there is another DreamWorks franchise that happens to have S-tier villains as well, that being Kung Fu Panda, namely Tai Lung, Lord Shen, and Kai. I'm not counting you. People like to talk about Tai Lung a lot, which is understandable, as Tai Lung was an amazing villain. He was very fierce, and this scene where he breaks out of prison is pure cinema. However, I feel like Lord Shen is the greatest villain in this franchise. In my eyes, Shen serves as the true antagonist to Po. The whole movie, Po tries to find inner peace and eventually does, while Shen suppresses and ignores his past. They are two sides of the same coin, and the movie highlights that perfectly through its imagery. Shen believes his parents didn't love him, which is something that hurts him deep down, but he pretends it doesn't. Shen's motivation is vengeance against his parents. He gets banished by them in the beginning, which leads to him wanting to take back his home, what he thinks is rightfully his, by taking over all of China. Unlike Tai Lung, Shen isn't introduced as the best fighter ever, but Shen doesn't need to be. He is mentally more dangerous than Tai Lung ever was. Shen doesn't mind getting his hands dirty in order to reach his goals, as demonstrated by how he killed Master Rhino with his new weapon. Shen honestly shouldn't even be as intimidating as he is. He's a peacock, which seems like an unusual design choice for a villain, but it works very well considering Shen is prideful. His design is beautiful and the peacock feathers look very aesthetically pleasing, but they also have practical usage in combat when it comes to distracting opponents. Shen's brutal, cold vibe carried my interest for the whole movie. During this scene, I felt so anxious for Po. It was like watching a toddler play with a loaded firearm, not knowing how dangerous the object they are messing with is. Shen isn't just a bad guy, he's a monster. He killed every single panda he could find when it was foretold that he would be defeated by a warrior of black and white. He basically committed genocide in order to ensure he wasn't defeated. After doing that, Shen proceeded to use Po's trauma against him, constantly tormenting him with it throughout the movie. He even projects onto Po about his parents because he knows how painful it is to be unloved.
Well, here's your answer. Your parents didn't love you.
But when Po overcomes all of it to defeat Shen and find inner peace, Shen can't believe it. Shen doesn't know how Po could get over what he did to him. which makes me somewhat sympathetic towards him. After all the evil he committed, he couldn't fathom how he could be forgiven, how Po could move on without lingering on the pain forever. When given the option to change his ways, Shen doubles down, attacking him. In doing so, he slices all the ropes around him, causing a building to fall towards him. As it's coming down, Shen does nothing but close his eyes and accept his death. He met his fate on the journey he took to avoid it. His brutality was unmatched, even killing his own henchmen when they defied him. He stopped at nothing to reach his goal to fill the empty void in his heart, and although I felt some sympathy for him, in the end he ultimately got what he deserved. Speaking of evil villains, next on this list is Scar from Lion King. When I think of villains who are just pure evil, I think of Scar. First off, his character design is a classic example of show don't tell. Just by looking at him, you know he's bad news. His dark mane and fur, his angular body, his sly expressions, and of course his signature scar all clue you into the nature of his character. They also serve as contrast to Mufasa's full red mane and golden fur, robust stature, and noble demeanor. Scar is also just a straight up savage. The way he manipulates Simba so effortlessly, almost as if he gets enjoyment from it. Similar to Lord Shen, his eloquent demeanor and sophisticated tone make him more captivating to watch. Scar's motivations for his actions are somewhat reasonable, as he is simply jealous of Mufasa and wants to rule. He has a desire for power, which is a common trait among villains. However, it's the cruelty in which these motivations lead him to behave that separates Scar. In the beginning, he sets up his nephew to get killed by hyenas. When that fails, he devises a carefully thought out plan to get rid of Mufasa. When the plan is put into motion, Scar is confronted with his brother hanging from a cliff, begging to be saved, only for Scar to look him directly in the eyes with a devious expression before digging his claws into Mufasa's and throwing him off the cliff to his death, all in front of Simba. After he traumatizes Simba, he gaslights him into thinking he is the one responsible for his dad's death, asking him what his mother's gonna think, and tells him to run far away, before sicking the hyenas on him to kill him. If this isn't the definition of a villain, I don't know what is. The funny part is at the end, when Scar is confronted by an adult Simba who learned the truth about what he did, Scar has the audacity to beg for his life and pull out the "but we're family" card, when he had no problem killing his own blood. He also blames the hyenas as the ones who came up with the idea and not him, which leads me to think Scar is a textbook sociopath. In the end, Simba decides not to kill him because, as he states himself, he is not like Scar, and instead he gets mauled to death by the hyenas in a blazing fire. Another villain who deserves to make this list is Syndrome from The Incredibles. Syndrome is what I would call a perfect villain. His backstory leads perfectly into his motivations and his eventual downward spiral. Syndrome was simply a kid who admired Mr. Incredible and viewed himself as his number one fan. However, when the feeling wasn't reciprocated back, he took it personal and set out on a path of destruction. The thing about Syndrome is he didn't just try to take over the world or something stupid as his revenge, but instead he crafted a carefully thought out plan that makes sense for his character after analyzing his journey. He felt betrayed by his hero and thought the reason for it was that he was looked down on for not having powers, so he decided to eliminate supers by creating a robot, showing them that his mind and brilliance is equally a superpower for him that rivals even the best heroes, as demonstrated by the fact he was successful in getting rid of numerous supers. He then says he's going to sell his technology so that everyone can become super.
And when everyone's super, no one will be.
He wants everyone to be equal due to the jealousy he holds for the unique abilities supers have, and how he feels like it puts them above other people. That's why he went out of his way to make all these inventions that prove a normal person can be just as super as any natural-born superhero. The worst part about it is originally when he was a kid, he made these things for a genuinely good cause, to help people. Even Mr. Incredible admits that he was wrong to treat him poorly in the past, adding validity to Syndrome's motivation. We can somewhat sympathize with him considering his perception is a result of the impact caused by rejection from his hero. However, by the time we meet his character, the bridge has already been burned, and Syndrome takes Mr. Incredible's apology as a sign of weakness. He looks down on Mr. Incredible, mocking the fact that he was ever a fan of his. Syndrome is also pretty entertaining in the way he carries himself. He is resentful of Mr. Incredible, but he doesn't put on an act of bitterness. He is outgoing and charismatic in his interactions, wanting to show that he's better than before. He's moved on and outgrown his childhood obsession. Despite this persona he displays, on the inside he is still a heartless individual. Aside from using supers to test the strength of his robot, he smiles after he thinks the robot killed Mr. Incredible. He sends missiles towards Elastigirl's jet and doesn't even flinch when she mentions she has kids aboard. He tortures Mr. Incredible, and when Mr. Incredible grabs his assistant who just saved him and threatens to crush her, he looks directly into his eyes and tells him to do it, putting her life at risk by attempting to call his bluff. Syndrome's transformation from an eager fan to a vengeful villain was beautifully written. However, the character of Syndrome was ultimately unstable, and his deep desire to get rid of supers and replace them led to his own demise. His ego was so large that he failed to account for the oversight in his plan regarding the AI's learning model, and it cost him. Let me know if you want me to make a part 2 to this video, as there are a lot more great villains out there. These are just some of my favorites. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.